our webinars. The webinar series on sustainable learning environments in engaged scholarship. Today we'll continue with the discussion and the debate. The title of our talk today is Geographies of Ethics in Rural Education. Our guest for today is Professor Dipane Hlalele from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Let me introduce Professor Dipane Hlalele. He is a full professor of education and a C2 NRF rated researcher. He appears in the world top 100 education scientists in South Africa. In 2022, he was position number 92. In 2024, he was position number 61. And also in 2024, he's number 87 according to the AD Scientific Index. He's a former assistant dean at the University of the Free State, a former college education lecturer, a former deputy principal and a teacher. He's a principal investigator in the Geographies of Ethics in Rural Humanities Research for 2024 to 2026. He is also a principal investigator in community engagement in context. That was in 2017 to 2019. He was also a principal investigator in sustainable urban rural learning connections. That was in 2017 to 2018. He's also a principal investigator in sustainable rural learning ecologies and sustainable futures for people of Afro-Montane, a co-investigator in adaptive leadership in community engagement and service learning. He has supervised 35 doctoral degree students and 26 master's degree students to completion. He has published over 60 intellectual pieces. He has examined over 150 theses and dissertation, both locally and internationally. He co-edited 2 books. His current research interest is drawn from positive community psychology. He's an advocate for helpful, hopeful, respectful research. He sits on the editorial board of the Journal of Educational Studies. Prof. Hlalele, let me take this opportunity and then give over to you. And thanks.
Dipane, your mic is still muted, so you might need to unmute.
Prof. Hlalele, you can unmute. I think you are muted.
Sorry about that. I had started talking and then I forgot that I had to unmute.
Okay,
good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for the introduction. I was just saying good afternoon to everybody in South Africa and good morning to the colleagues on the other side of the ocean. I hope now my screen is showing.
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. As you heard, I do a lot of research in rural education, and also in with rural people and rural communities. And then a few years back, somebody hijacked me into the ethics committee here at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. And I happened to chair that committee. So I got interested in doing research on ethics. And then I said, no, I must not, because I found new love, I must not leave my previous love for rural education. So I brought the two together. And then I'm now doing ethics in rural education research. But we have a bigger project that is funded now, which deals with ethics in rural humanities research. So in the bigger project, we have other areas of specialization, including rural religion, rural tourism, and so on. I hope I have made the introduction that satisfies everybody. So let me try and start moving with the introduction. Research ethics are moral principles that guide researchers to conduct research and report without deception or intention to harm the participants of the study or members of society as a whole, whether knowingly or unknowingly. So we can't have an excuse that, well, there was harm, but I didn't know. Anticipation is very important when it comes to ethics. And then it also deals with privacy. Just to mention, for those that do not know, ethics is a branch of philosophy. So when you see philosophical terms here, many of them will come through as I go through this presentation. So don't be surprised. Privacy can be defined as an individual condition of life characterized by exclusion from publicity. Even if we do research, we need to respect the people's privacy, the participants' privacy. And it describes the person's interest in controlling access to their personal information. So even if we go and do research, I know some researchers think that the participants owe them the data, which is not true. The participants own the data and they can give it voluntarily. So that's what we expect in research. So if you hear, because this is a follow-up on the presentation that was done last week on ethics, if you hear some repetitions, I'm going to ask you to enjoy them. If you hear new things, please be open to them and appreciate them. So confidentiality is also about whether and how research data may be disclosed carelessly and inadvertently, thus revealing the participants' identity or category, making them vulnerable to harm. Right. The rationale, why do we need to talk about the rural context? Why do we need to focus on rural people, rural communities? And historically, a number of famous and not so famous research ethics scandals have been recorded. Some of them were about repeated incidents of deception, conducting research without consent, because they are rural people. We think we can just go in there and generate our data or collect it, as some may say. Involuntary sterilization, in another language, and I was forced to sterilize and so on. Cases of smallpox, I'm sure some of you know the syphilis scandal. We will come to it now. Some harm in the form of depression, muscle biopsy, and others. So historically, there has been damage or harm done to rural people and other people as well because of research. Vulnerable populations in rural African settings are confronted with distinctive ethical and cultural challenges due to the community context of their research, their methods of investigation, and the implications of the findings for the populations. one of the examples that we can make here is misrepresentation. Colleagues and researchers will come from elsewhere and come and stay in a rural community for 2 weeks. Sometimes not even stay, fly in by the morning and fly out by the night, and then say they understand the problems of the rural people, and then go and misrepresent them in research and publications. I'm still continuing with why rural. Place consciousness in research is an ethical concern for researchers. So Downs is a researcher in Australia in rural education, and Tabete is a South African, as well as participants. So researchers and participants must be conscious of their place, the rural place. And then several scholars also made cases for a differentiated approach to ethical practice. The reason why rural, as I went through literature, I noted that different researchers made cases for different contexts. And one of those, Wassenaar and Mutenera, they make a case for an enunciated ethical approach associated with HIV transmission. The Wassenaar and the other, Wassenaar, if I were to share with you, Wassenaar is also another research ethics chair in the Biomedical Research Ethics Committee at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. So he has written a lot about research ethics and the conduct of research ethics committees, and also supervised students. Maybe when you see the other name, maybe the name is the name of the student that was supervised by him. And then also artificial intelligence. What is important with artificial intelligence is that even if you have that benefit, it must also be used ethically. The conduct of researchers in the use of artificial intelligence must also be ethical. The complex nature of rural spaces and the realization that no two rural contexts are identical. Many years ago, I was of the view that no two rural contexts are identical. So what you apply at one rural context, you may not apply at the next rural context. Ethical rural humanities research is expected to pay attention to a plethora of rural diversities and unique geographies. Right, the rationale for this study, according to Nkosi there, and the others, they noted real power differences in social and political vulnerabilities that underscore the ongoing need for the protection of participants in research, ensuring that the persons who are susceptible to physical or psychological harm, exploitation, or coercion are recognized as such and safeguarded while entitled to meaningful engagement and respect. So the rural people and communities, they still need to participate respectfully in research, but it must be recognized that they may be vulnerable to either physical, psychological, or exploitation and coercion. Because you are rural, you are not so vocal, then you owe the researcher something. This, I highlighted there the term geographies. I think from here, I've started delving into the concept of geographies. I'll also do some deeper digging of the concept later on. Therefore, whilst universal ethical principles should unwaveringly be upheld at all times, ethical practices need to be attentive, sensitive, appreciative, and adaptable to the rural attributes of rural research space, community, people, and communities. I'm also making you aware that when we come to the concept of geographies, I would have already referred to it, even though this may look to be tacit. An ethical approach to rural research is one that recognizes the effects of geography and location on the design, funding,
surrounding the region.
Hello. Okay. Funding, implementation, and reporting of the research. So it's not only about, it's about the design. When the project is conceptualized, the research side, and then how it is funded, how it is implemented, and the reporting of the research. All of those must be permeated or imbued by ethical concerns. Consideration or omission of the peculiarities of rural places has the potential to either benefit or harm people, places, and their communities. In South Africa, as a democratic country, we say in the constitution, human dignity, equality, and the advancement of human rights must be expected, promoted, and protected. That is in terms of the constitution. So rural people deserve the same as their urban counterparts. Ethics are not based on absolute standards, but are situational. This means that considering the particular context of research in a research project, a particular context must be considered. Consequently, researchers must weigh competing ethical obligations to research participants, students, professional colleagues, employers, and funders, amongst others, while recognizing that obligations to research participants are usually primary. So what is primary there is the participants. Even though we know our research students, the professional colleagues, and the employers, they are only looking at the outputs. So how you get there may not be their consideration. As long as you can bring in publications and students that have graduated. Just as individuals vary in their moral judgments, actions, and emotions, so do the world of diverse societies differ in what they define as ethical and unethical. What force ethics say in there is that what may apply as ethical to me, even though we still hold a universal principle of ethics, or the unitarized position on ethics, it does not necessarily mean that we do not have to be flexible. We do not have to consider diversity. I have noted in my experience now as an ethics chair, even though studies are in the same context, or maybe similar context, from the same discipline, but issues of ethics differ. It does not necessarily mean that because we approve the protocol from a particular discipline, all those that are associated with it will be approved. So we apply differentiation, or we recognize diversity in terms of research ethics. It is acceptable, therefore, to conclude that ethical judgments, by their very nature, ponder a variety of realities. Those realities can be relative and/or actual, and are therefore diverse. Diversity foregrounds plurality, fluidity, and the multiplicity of these geographies. We are getting closer and closer to defining, conceptualizing, or crystallizing the concept of geographies. The concept geography is understood as a space in a psycho and socio-political and recursively constructed sense. That is very heavy. But what that means is that the geographies, as we put it here, it's way beyond the geospatial sense that we know. Then like the geography of a place, like the space wherein a particular place is found, but it is more abstract. So geographies include exceptionism. Now you see those isms. I told you at the beginning that the ethics is a branch of philosophy. So you'll see a lot of isms there. Exceptionism, situationism, subjectivism, and absolutism. mapped across relativism and idealism as dimensions. So there's going to be a diagram that I show that explains this and their relationship. Actually, there's more than one, but I only uploaded one here. It's available on our famous Dr. Google. Right, and then on to theoretical orientations. Right, we'll deal with, there are many theories of ethics, but we'll deal with 4 primary ones. The first one is utilitarianism. I'm sure we understand the word utility, meaning usefulness. So places, this one theoretical orientation, it places higher value on results than rules. If we achieve what we want, then rules can be dealt with some way. For example, actions are deemed good or right if they maximize happiness or pleasure throughout society, regardless of whether some harm is done there, but as long as we achieve the intended outcomes. Therefore, the right course of action from an ethical point of view would be to choose the means that would produce the greatest amount of utility, that is usefulness, welfare or well-being. And then the critique there, this one is amenable to a situation where the end justifies the means. So because we have an end in sight, how we get there doesn't matter, even if there's harm in the process. Sometimes this happens when a national goal needs to be achieved. When a national goal needs to be achieved, there can be some harm, there can be some casualties in the process, and then a particular national goal is achieved. You'll see that in the maybe production of medicine. So there's some animals or some people used to achieve that. So the end is justifying the means. Even if something happens to those that were used to achieve that national imperative, ethically they say, no, we are okay. Right, the ontology is premised on the assertion that ethical intent and observing the right rules is a desirable pathway to ethical conduct than achieving the desired results. Then you can see this one moving away from the outcome being the most important. Now we're saying the rules must be followed. So there must be adherence to rules, carving a desirable pathway, guiding the conduct of researchers. Immanuel Kant, some of you know Immanuel Kant uses universalization as a form of rational thought that assumes the inherent quality of all human beings. So if these rules apply, they must apply across the board. So you universalize or unitarize the application of rules. So rules must be rules and rules must be followed. Some will say to the latter. Okay, equality of participants becomes central to ethical research conduct. So in conducting research, the participants are equal. So we don't say these ones are better and these ones can be used to achieve certain outcomes. Therefore, it requires that we put duty first, act rationally, and give moral weight to the inherent quality of human beings. And then the third one is social justice and social contract theory. It advocates, these are advocates of social justice that are concerned with parity of participation and distributive justice. Regarding the social contracts, people give up certain rights to government in exchange for security and common benefits. Consistently, an ongoing balancing act between human desires for freedom and human desires for order is a perpetual facet of existence. I've seen that the time is running out, so I'm trying to catch up. And then the last one, which is virtue theory, it cherishes the value of virtuous rather than formal rules or useful results. Virtue has it that desirable conduct in research is determined by reason and wisdom. So we must reason it out. We must rationalize and say, okay, and use wisdom. So researchers must have virtue or be virtuous. There is the diagram that I spoke about, and relativism and idealism. So those are dimensions. Those are dimensions. And then you have exceptionists. Remember exceptionalism, subjectivism, situationism, absolutism. You remember the four? Yeah. Very quickly there, you can conventionalists who tolerate exceptions to moral standards when benefits offset potential harmful consequences. Like those are rule utilitarians. So the results are very important. What we want to achieve is important. Subjectivism, and then I think you can go through that. Very briefly, the historiographical sketch in terms of ethics, the syphilis, participants, informed consent was neglected. There, way back in the 1930s in the US, black men and were treated for what is called bad blood. Syphilis, it was called bad blood then, but it was done on black men only. So there was discrimination there. And then the Nuremberg Code developed as a response to the Nazi atrocities committed during the World War II, where in the name of research, horrific research was conducted on people. The code sought to ensure compliance with informed consent of participants. So participants now had to consent to their participation in research. So we don't only not say it's informed consent, we also say it's voluntary informed consent. So they can withdraw at any time. The Helsinki Declaration specified that respect and protection of research participants should be considered in all research projects. And then the US Common Rule developed as a result of the syphilis scandal. The protection of human participants was upfront there. The Belmont report, this one introduced the review of research. That's why now when you're going to do research with human participants, it has to go through an ethics review process to ensure protection of participants. The Singapore Statement on Research Integrity, we also had in South Africa, the Department of Health 2015 guidelines. They are now being developed. I think that process is nearing completion. I was lucky to participate in it. So we will now have the National Department of Health 2024 guidelines on research ethics. And then there was the Cape Town Statement last year when there was a conference here on research integrity. I know this year there's one in Athens, Greece. So then the concept that I spoke about, geographies, I don't intend taking a long time here, but I need to clarify this because in my view, it's very heavy. Particularly if there are students here, I must try and simplify it. So ethical judgments, we have dealt with this one. Therefore, diversity means that there is plurality, there's fluidity, there's multiplicity. So the concept of geography there, I explained it again. It's just a repetition just for you to understand what it means. And then our methodology, and then I'm coming to what I think people are looking forward to hearing from our preliminary or baseline study here. in terms of research ethics. We did a scoping review. A scoping review is a research process with the specific objective of summarizing evidence to communicate the breadth and depth of a research field. We use databases like Google Scholar, Scopus, and so on. The search words: rural education, rural ecology, rural schools. We use Prisma for the analysis, and then this study was also, we applied for ethical clearance and it was exempted. Usually when there is no risk, studies are exempted. And the reason why we had to apply is that we are of the view that all research must be ethically accounted for. So the preliminary results, we had 189 publications, 159 articles, 30 book chapters from 2014 to 2023. 69 were sole authored, and then 120 co-authored, 119 international and 70 South African. Out of the 189, 101 made reference to ethics. They just ended there. All research conducted must be conducted ethically, so they ended there. So, and then we dug further, and then 60 out of the 101 mentioned further detail. So in the next slides, I'll show the details that they mentioned, some of them. What did they say about ethics? Okay, reference to ethics, nearly half of the literature does not make any reference to ethics. I think we saw it in the previous slide. Nearly half of them is 47%. Right, those that made mention of or added further detail, other than just mentioning that the research has to be conducted in ways that are ethical, regarding the protection of participants and the research context, the protection of participants and research context were recognized as priorities for ethical consideration in the research process. In other words, they will mention that protection of participants and the research context are priorities for ethical considerations. 3 out of 10 publications mentioned the protection of participants and their right to privacy. So out of the 101, 3 out of 10. So they mentioned that. The reviewed literature indicated that the researchers need to work towards the protection of research participants, whilst also ensuring full account of factors of the research context of the study. So we give you examples there. To ensure, please don't worry about ensure, it's not our fault, this is how it was written where we took it. So remember, when in ethical ways, you don't need to change what they mentioned. You may explain it later, but you don't have the right to edit it. So findings also revealed that almost 77% of the reviewed literature did not mention how to ensure the integrity of the study in the research process. So it was mentioned that validity and research integrity involve stages of the research from deciding on a research topic. These ones, Wilson and the others, they went broader. From deciding a research topic, they say you need to consider ethics. From determining the data collection methods, you have to consider ethics. Selection of participants, you have to be ethical. Identification of priorities and disseminating of the results, you have to be ethical. And then the others, the researcher, they outline ethical aspects such as transparency, honesty, integrity, as the process that prevents the researcher to fabricate, falsify, and misrepresent data. This implies that the validity of the study relied on the disclosure of the research methods, materials, assumptions, analysis, and other information that is needed to evaluate the research. So the fabrication and the falsification, researchers have to be aware of that, or misrepresentation of data. They can't say, no, I misrepresented because I did not know. Remember, one of the first slides there is knowingly or unknowingly. Even if you say you don't know, there's no excuse. Respect and non-discrimination, respect to the participants and fair treatment are crucial in the research process. This is what they mentioned. It is important for the research questions and requirements not to exclude any participants involved in the research process. These ones I think they were mentioning that each participant must stand a fair chance of being included in the research process. And then the respect and non-discrimination ethical components also relates to researchers treating those who decline to participate in a study fairly without any prejudice. This is what Yang and Zhang mentioned. Right, participants' right to freedom from harm and discomfort. It was noted that 1 in 5 of the 101 reviewed publications mentioned the ethics showed the importance of the researchers to analyze and anticipate potential risks and benefits to the research participants. Possible benefits include freedom to withdraw from the research process. That's I emphasized that it is voluntary. From the research process, once experiencing any feeling of discomfort. These potential risks and benefits should be provided to the participants in the written informed consent before they are involved in the research process. And those mentioned it. Now, yeah, I'm coming close to my presentation now. So what can be done? We say as a rule of thumb, all research must be ethically accounted for. Whether it's exempted, it's no risk, it's exempted, but there must be an evidence of exemption. So you must have applied for ethical clearance. We can see if nearly half of the publications did not say anything about ethics, it means that we are not considering ethics as a crucial factor in terms of the research conduct. We can also try to raise levels of awareness regarding compliance with ethics in various ways. Whether those that violated this rule or breached. But I know at other universities, I won't mention names. When you go and you conduct research, you collect the data or you generate data without ethical clearance. Already the institution tries to absolve themselves from any culpability. They say they can't be blamed. But I know some of the legal experts say you cannot go to court and you are not involved there as a culprit because you are not going there with clean hands. So they say if you go in there with clean hands, you must have raised the level of awareness, made people aware, and there must have been some commitment that they will commit to following due procedure until they receive ethical clearance approval, and then that. And then there's also another issue of compensation where research ethics committees and research institutes are encouraged to take insurance so that when something happens, I know in the humanities we don't have many of those cases, but in biomedical research you may have where you take people's tissues and so on. You may have serious harm there, or they call them serious adverse events, even where when you induce some substance in them, some of them may die, some of them may be injured, and those are severe adverse events. So some journals or publication outlets made ethical clearance a requirement. Yeah, we're still looking for other solutions, and then maybe we can pick up some of the solutions in the deliberations that follow. I was given 50 minutes, and I think I did very well in terms of time. Right, acknowledgement, we need to acknowledge, I won't mention the amount that the National Research Foundation found this project fundable. So they gave us some money until 2026. So this is what we will be busy with for these 3 years. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming to listen to this. If I repeated some of the things, I hope you enjoyed the repetitions.
Well, thank you very much, Prof. Hlalele. We'll give over to Prof. Bonani just to make some few reflections, and then we'll open up the floor for comments and questions on issues that you touch on. Prof. Bonani, are you there?
She's not in a space, Milton. She sent an apology because she had a conflict.
Okay. Are you going to make some few reflections? I'll also come in later. All right.
I can come in later. So do you want me to do the reflections now?
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Prof. Hlalele, for continuing to extend our thinking in relation to the nuances of ethics. I think importantly for all of us, we assume Western traditions in terms of what is considered to be ethical, but we also recognize the harm that particular Western traditions have brought to particular spaces such as ours, shared across Africa and the Caribbean, and the ways in which, importantly, as you have identified, research is can be used to misrepresent a particular population, almost helicoptering, where researchers feel that they can helicopter in and helicopter out, and then based upon that movement, they have a sense of who this community is, and certainly how that community operates and how they come to be. I particularly appreciated your recognition of the need for us to enunciate ethical approaches based on context. So I broaden it to context because in some of our cases, within research in the Caribbean, it may not be a rural context, it may be, but it might be an urban context, but essentially it's still a small island context. So I really do appreciate that recognition of the need to enunciate ethical approaches in small island and in rural contexts, recognizing that intimate research contexts are not all, they might be similar, but they're not identical. I think when you talked about geography and location as being important in our thinking and our recognition about how do we ethically engage with a particular community. And one of the things that I took note of is that, yes, you have geography, yes, you have location, but we also need to consider the history of contact in that space with research and with researchers. So that also has to come into play in our thinking about how do we engage in research ethically in rural contexts and in, I will add for the Caribbean, small island context. I will end by saying that the recognition as well that ethics is situational and not absolute. I think for many of us, that was a sigh of a breath of fresh air, because quite often we feel driven to adhere to particular standards for ethics that come from particular traditions, and you have outlined those different traditions that may emerge from a particular tradition without us really interrogating what those traditions are, and therefore how do those traditions come into play in the particular context within which we are engaging in the research. So significantly, I think what I have heard from you and what we have all heard from you is a call for us to re-examine, and this is a continued call from the presentation that took place last week, which is a call for us to re-examine understandings, conceptions, constructions, the operationalization across the various spaces of ethics, and particularly when we are working with populations that are at risk or easily harmed or have had a history of harmful contact when it comes to research. So on behalf of the team, I want to thank you for sharing your words of wisdom with us this morning. And I want to hand over, because I think that there will be many, many interesting questions emerging, particularly the ways in which this follows on from the presentation last week. I think we have a lot of discussion to have, so I want to hand the floor back over to Milton and for us to engage in that discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lorette, and thanks, Prof. Hlalele, for really just amplifying what we started last week, just deepening the discussions about the issues around ethics. And then, as you indicated in your talk, to say, this comes from the philosophy. It's about ethos, is concern, is amplifying human conduct and behavior. And I think you also emphasized what we started with last week, just orientating us around the principles that inform ethics and research, which is about issues on social values, whether it's clinical values, issues around scientific validity, issues around fairness when we are conducting the study, and then also being conscious and then being aware of the risk that are also involved in research, and always thinking as to how can we can mitigate those risks. I think to amplify issues around the informed consent you were referring, and then telling us and then making us aware about the syphilis scandal, and then the what you call it, the bad blood or blood bet. But what's the point that you are trying to share with us to say what is important in research, and then as we conduct research, we should always demonstrate respect. Other issues that we also amplify are around what guides us as we are doing research, to say issues around anonymity, issues around informed consent, voluntary participation, potential harm that is there. I think one of the most important things that you also emphasize, you were trying to zoom your discussions around rurality or rural education, which is just basically a state of mind or a way of life. This is a peri-urban a kind of a situation which demonstrated disparities that are there in terms of human resources and also the livelihood. To say those people, they might be vulnerable because of under-resources, because of inadequate infrastructure, because of lack of basic services. But I like, I'm going to zoom into one of your theoretical frameworks that you highlighted. You mentioned about 4 of them, which is the virtue, which is deontology, and the first one. But I want to zoom into this one that I think is very central, which is the social justice and social contract theory, which is about the parity of the participants. I think the point that you were trying to drive us as we are wearing this lens of the social justice and social contract theory is we have to be conscious of recultivating individual and institutionalized practices that are there. We also need to be conscious and also challenge the deficit thinking. We also have to be aware of marginalization and then also cultural imperialism that is there. We have to be conscious of and also try to push equal justice in all spheres as we are conducting our studies, and then make sure that we create a space that is equal opportunities and also that will respect the human rights. And then wherein that particular theoretical framework is about disrupting the arrangements that promotes, the marginalization and exclusionary practices. But then that if we are using that particular theoretical lens, that will help us to also bring those who are in the periphery to come to the center, and then we show them full respect, we give them care, we give them recognition and also empathy. And I'm sure if we are doing that, we'll be in the position also to elevate and elicit what you call it, the revolutionary overtones. Prof. Hlalele, thanks really for sharing this with us. I think you have shared a lot in terms of how best can we protect the participants, how best can we make sure that we give right to privacy, and then you touch on other issues about the research integrity, which is very central, respect, and also to make sure that we are not discriminatory in whatever that we're doing. What is in the center as we're doing research is make sure that we create and then make space for participants to feel free, and then also to make sure that they are protected from any harm. Let me pause here so that I create space and also allow other colleagues to ask questions and then also make some comments. Colleagues, the floor is open. Prof. Dr. Lorette, you can help us in identifying the hands and
sure, persons just need to use the reactions button at the bottom of the screen, and you would be able to raise your hands, etc.
Yes, colleagues, you can raise your hands and then make comments and ask questions. Do you see any hand?
No, but colleagues, you can also post your questions or comments in the chat if you feel more comfortable doing that.
Does it mean I continue to be a good teacher? All my students understand.
They say, you know, Lacan, in his writing, he said he write in such a way that not everybody will understand. But I don't think that was intention. Let's give colleagues a chance to ask. I'm trying to look for hands. I don't see hands. Or maybe colleagues are struggling to, so they go to reactions and then you can click on.
Yes, so you click raise hand at the reactions.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, they can just open their mic and contribute. So unmute themselves and contribute.
You can ask.
Yes, there is Dr. Selina there.
I was saying you can ask any question. I know people complain about how long it takes to get ethical clearance. You can even ask those questions.
Yeah. Prof. Dr. Mudau.
So we have a few mics open, Milton. I see Dr. Selina has her hand up, and then Dr. Fumani.
Yes, you can unmute Dr. Mudau. Yes, Dr. Mudau, you are unmuted. And then we'll take Dr. Fumani.
Okay, thank you so much, colleagues, and thank you so much, Prof, for sharing this information on ethics. I really learned a lot, and I want to understand from you, Prof. I'm asking myself, I was reluctant to ask this question, but I thought, let me ask you, since you're saying ask anything. I'm asking myself, you're talking about the ethics in the rural education, geographies of ethics. And I'm asking myself, what is it exactly that you are funded for these 3 years in relation to ethics? I want to have an understanding of what is going on and how should things be based on what you have just presented. Thank you.
Prof. Hlalele, maybe you can respond to that and then we'll take.
Can I respond? Yes. Yeah, in my view, okay, I'm the lead investigator, so I think the conceptual ownership rests with me. So in my view, we want to know whether you are exceptionalist, you are situationalist, you remember them? In conducting research with rural people, how do you do that? Do you consider well, do you respect them? Or do you think that they owe you something? Do you give them the same level of respect as you do with people in smart offices and those who are smartly dressed and so on? That's what we want to understand. Your conduct as a researcher. What are you doing? Like we started now with literature. You can see that the authors go to rural places and they just collect data and they say nothing about ethics. What does that mean? Are they exceptionalists? Are they looking at are they utilitarian? Are they looking at the end product? And they don't think about they have to conduct research in ways that are respectful. They don't think that they have to follow the ethical processes. Remember, and then even with your title, how do you craft your title? Do you consider the rural context when you craft your title? That's what we want. That's what we are funded for. So we will understand the rural education researchers are mainly situationists or are mainly utilitarianists. And so on. That's what we want to understand. That's what I think I am funded for. If I were to talk about,
So,
I'm
Prof.
funded
Hlalele,
to.
Sorry, Prof. Hlalele, but just to clarify, is it then that you are going to be reviewing their publications to determine that, or you review their publications and then have an interview? So I think the question to my mind was methodologically, how are you making that determination about whether they're exceptionalists or situationalists, etc.?
Yes, we still need to go there, and in the next phase, we will then craft our instruments and decide on the methodologies. For now, we are in the first phase where we are dealing with literature, and we think that literature will inform our thinking methodologically and so on, and the choice of participants and so on. So the project is like that. It's phased or stepped. So the first phase is what we are dealing with now, that of literature. We think that from that literature, we will have a few learnings, and those learnings will inform our methods, will inform our processes going forward.
Okay, thanks, Prof. Can we take the comments or questions from Dr. Hlalele, and then I see Khawele Mahlatsi also has the hand.
Yeah, there's also a comment from Blom.
Yes.
Let's give Blom.
Yes, let's give Dr. Hlalele the space first.
Thank you so much, Bundati Limme. Prof. Hlalele, this topic, I love the geographies and how you unpack that. The bigger picture, because there's a project in the bigger picture, but I'm also interested in the bigger picture of this project from its infancy, like you're saying, it's the first step to say, how can it be disseminated to other institutions, and especially the ethics committee? I'm saying this with experience, where rurality is still conceptualized as a problematic space, And in the ethics committee, we face a lot of decline because there's still that mindset. So I'm just actually interested to say, how are we going to unlock the mindset, especially to the people who sit in the ethics? No matter how much you've put and explained and thorough, but there's still mindset and the conceptual understanding that rurality is just a fixed space and is not even evolving. I think I'm troubled by that because we face a lot of challenges. I don't know how far this project is going to help us actually to also challenge the ethics committee, because unless we get somebody who understands where the research on rurality as a generative space is going, we're still going to have a problem. It's a comment, it's a question, just my frustration, because unless you go and sit in those committees, we still going to face a high road. I don't know if it makes sense, but that's been my observation. So the issue of geographies is very interesting because as a space, it's socially constructed, it's politically, it's a colonized space. So there are so many tensions around rurality. So for me, the bigger picture in terms of the ethics committees in various universities, what's your projection on that one?
Yeah, maybe you must recruit me as your research ethics chair. If we don't understand particular contexts, that's my attitude, and we have practiced this. If you don't understand the particular context and so on, we either look at it in terms of the number of applications that we receive in that space. If it's just a few, we have the liberty to get an expert to come and help us understand. So we can get an expert to come and deal with those that we think we may not understand them. As the ethics committee, this is our practice. Or if there are many, we get a permanent member from that space. So we know that at least we are covered. Somebody can be able to explain to us. That's how we approach it here. We understand that we will not understand all the contexts. Even what is said to be a similar context, like I said in my presentation, what is said to be a similar context is not identical. There are variations. So the relativity in terms of space, the subjectivities in terms of space, I think we understand those. I cannot say I understand them. I think in the committee we understand those. So more often we either get somebody on a temporary basis or on a permanent basis. So we know that if there are applications from that angle, we have somebody. Like now at our institution, you would maybe know there are students who will do their whole studies in an indigenous language, like they do a PhD in Isizu. Not writing in English, writing in Isizu, everything. So we have colleagues that help us with that. They are permanent members of the committee. So I think it's how you deal with them, and how is also the attitude of the members of the committee, whether they think that, you see, the problem with ethics that I observed is that people think that they know better. And that is a big problem. They are not amenable to being persuaded to say, no, this is ethics. I know that they also say that about me, but where we think that we should take care of these diversities or celebrate diversities, we do in our own small way. I'm sure we will not make everybody happy, but we try. Maybe before we go to Kauhelo, I'm tempted to ask if the co-researcher the co-researcher decides to withdraw from the study, what now? Can we replace them? Yes. Yes, respect their decision to withdraw, and you can note it in your report, research report, or that so many stayed the course and they withdrew. If you can get the reasons why they are withdrawing, you can learn a lot from them. Maybe they're withdrawing because you are a bossy researcher, then you are a bullying researcher. So they will help you in terms of your research. Yeah, maybe Hlalele.
You can unmute.
Thank you. Am I audible? Can I go ahead?
Yes, please, Hlalele.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I must apologize. I've joined in a little bit late, but I think I caught up with you, Prof, when you said your scoping review, you applied for ethics for your scoping review. And I wanted to understand two things. The first thing is that, is it necessary to apply for ethics when you are doing a scoping review? Because I might be young and naive, but to me, it sounds like an exercise of formality just to do it. But maybe I would appreciate your comment on that. And then the second thing, I'm just having load shedding. So I wanted to look for the article that was published from Stellenbosch University. I don't know, is it 3 or 2 years ago? I could have maybe looked for it, but my laptop only works with electricity. But anyway, I wanted to ask this: if a publication deliberately misrepresents the findings, because I think that publication was with people who look like me, the African people, and it served a certain narrative. I cannot remember exactly what was the title or what was the article about, but I wanted to ask this: is that a moral, ethical issue, or is it just someone with biasness at its exceptional manifestation, or is it also a moral, ethical issue? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think with whether it's a principle or it's a rule of thumb that all research must be ethically accounted for. So if you don't need to be reviewed, we must exempt it. So exemption means we are not going to review it. There's no risk there. You can go ahead. We must have a record. If we don't have records, you may be in trouble. So we must have a record. That okay, and then we give you, there are people here that have the mandate to exempt studies from ethics reviews. So, but if it's exempted, it is accounted for. I also got one that was exempted from an examiner who said, this was exempted from ethics review, but in my view, it was not supposed to have been exempted. So you see the danger there. So those participants, they may have been harmed due to the fact that the person incorrectly exempted the application from ethics review, and then the participants may have been harmed. So just to say, here is my study, just check whether it qualifies to be reviewed by the ethics committee or not. That's what we say. Okay, it is not reviewed. It is exempted. Exemption means we are not going to review it. So we give you a certificate of exemption from ethics review. Okay, the misrepresentation, I think there are 2 studies from the Western Cape. One was about the Black students in the science subjects, their choices. And another one was about the colored women's intelligence and so on. I know the one of them, if not both of them, there was a retraction somewhere. Because that other community. So when you do research, you're also doing research about a particular community. So that community was up in arms, and then they wrote to the journal and so on and so on. As far as I remember, there was a retraction of some sorts. But you are right. We all have our biases. We can't run away from that. Some people try to be objective, and just make an example of. I know some of you watch wrestling. You watch wrestling. There's a guy there called Hoggle, and there's a guy called Big Show. And when those two come and face each other, I am telling you, even if you are not consciously doing so, but you have already taken sides. You have already said, oh, this young fellow or this small fellow is going to be destroyed by this big one. Or you say, yeah, big man, teach this fellow a lesson. So we have our biases. It's just that in research, we must declare our biases and say how we're going to deal with them. That's being ethical. So misrepresentation, if you misrepresent, after we have approved, there's a process there, then it's a process of integrity. How do you then conduct research? If you conduct it in ways that are not ethical, we reserve the right to revoke the approval. We have done it a few times. So, like somebody says in the informed consent form, they will say they will be silent about something, an incentive. And when they write an email recruiting participants, they say, okay, you can come to my place. I have a car wash there. You'll get 50% discount if you do this and that and that. That's serious research misconduct. So yeah, we have dealt with such cases. We will withdraw it. Sometimes it's not us, it's the communities that will be complaining. So we think that communities are illiterate, but communities are literate. They say, if you look at the research ethics committees, there's a whistleblowing line there. They blow the whistle. And then we will call you to come and explain. And if you don't have answers, then we deal with that. So a scoping review, it just has to be on record that it was exempted. It's not reviewed. So it's fine. As long as there's a record that showed that you are doing this. Some ethics committees deal with it differently. They say, no, if it's a scoping review or desktop study, you don't need to submit an application. You need to submit an application and we exempt it from review. At least you have a record, you are covered. And this thing of going to the field before you get ethical clearance is problematic. There is what is called research-induced trauma. Research-induced trauma. Let's say you're asking simple questions. Simple questions like, are you married? Yes or no? Yes, I'm married. For how long have you been married? 20 years. If that 20 years of marriage was 20 years of a place starting with an H, then that induces trauma because those memories come back. Now you are reintroducing the trauma that was there, the harm that was experienced by the participant and so on. But I'm just asking a simple question. Are you married? How long have you been married for? That simple question. So how do we then know if you don't submit your application to us to check whether the participants are protected or not? Am I right or am I right?
Thanks, Prof. Hlalele. I see another question from Mr. Konza is saying, well, it's much appreciated. What are the guiding principles underlying ethical research, if I may ask?
You have many of them.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Now you can continue.
Okay, you have many of them. I'll give you a few and then you can look for the rest. Respect, honesty. You can look for the rest.
Thank you, Prof. Prof,
Confidentiality, you can go on and on. I think they were presented in the last week's presentation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Prof. Prof, my question is related to what Dr. Khanar was asking, which is around the construct rurality. To say, are we not maybe running the risk of perhaps essentializing the construct rurality by trying to magnify it as something totally different? Let me make a scenario, or for example, on discourses. The people in the agriculturalist, they will look or define rurality as a countryside, maybe for some commercial reasons or for farming. And you mentioned the utilitarian. Maybe they might look at the rurality as a production area, maybe for economic purposes. And then others, maybe from community sustainability, they might see it as just a mere rural space or a peri-urban space. And others may be arguing for the discourse in nature conservationist. They might see it as a potential area for nature area. So the question that I'm asking is, if we are pushing for this rurality, are we not maybe running the risk of essentializing the construct? Or perhaps maybe we should take it as a non-essentialist, from a non-essentialist perspective. Just saying, yes, maybe the disparities are there. And the other area is having more resources and the other is not. But let me hear from your side.
Yeah, this is our problem. Our problem in rurality as a construct. It looks like we always have to compare it to something else, which I think we should do away with that. Oftentimes there are many studies that say what rural, what, and they end there. They say nothing about rural, and then they say something about the townships and so on. I think rural spaces must be seen for what they are. And rural spaces must not try to be urban spaces or something else that they are not. They must be what they are, their assets there. Let's look at those assets there and let's look at how they survive there. Let's look at how rural people have their own livelihoods. Leave the urban areas. And I know why you're saying this, because most of the time, the locus of control and the locus of power, it's outside of rural spaces. It's from elsewhere. Even the people that come from rural areas, many years ago, we were trying to develop something that is called a rural education policy here in South Africa. And then I understand now it's called a National Framework for Rural Education. So it was adopted by Parliament. So even somebody that comes from a rural space, once they get into the cozy offices, they forget where they come from. And they think of rural spaces, they conceptualize them as something else other than what they are. They must not be compared to anything or any other space. They must stand in their own right, with their own assets, with their own strategies of survival. There are many people that say in rural places and rural spaces and have made a life of their own livelihoods. But because there is this mindset that says, if you are nowhere near something urban, we even call it peri-urban, then we don't know what you're talking, or semi-rural, and then we don't know what you're talking about now. We get confused more and more. And the reason, in my view, in my doing research about rural education, in my view, that's why we have so many informal settlements. People leave their rural spaces where they are food secure, and they go and stay in informal settlement where they are food insecure. Just because if their lives were to be complete, they have to be associated with something urban, even if it's a rural town. But it's called, it looks like it's urban, but it's a rural town. How do you see rural towns? That town there is a service center for surrounding rural communities. The biggest dealership there is a John Deere tractors and so on, farming implements. That's the biggest one. And then you'll have a few retail stores there. And then that is called a town. It's not a town. It's a rural place also. Okay. But our current study is not about the rurality and rural. It's about the ethics of conducting research in rural spaces. So the emphasis is now, at least it has shifted from defining the rural spaces to how do researchers go there and conduct research? Are they exceptionalism in their approach? Are they situationalist? Are they involved in academic tourism? Maybe it will come up there. We don't know. So as research evolves, the previous phases will inform the upcoming phases. So we are not preempting what is forthcoming. We're saying we keep an open mind. We want to learn as we go along. And the funders thought that this is a good thing. We will give you that. We're still going to develop instruments. Now I'm answering another question. Okay. I don't know if I tried my
Yes,
best.
yes. Oh, thank you very much. I think you have responded to what I was asking. Yes, let's check if maybe there are any other comments or hands up and colleagues who wants to make any contribution. From my side, I don't see anything.
Yeah.
Maybe Dr. Lorette, maybe I should take this opportunity, Prof, if you don't have anything to add on.
Yeah.
Just to thank you very much for your time and sharing with us the kind of work that
I can just
doing.
mention before the thank you.
Yes.
I can just mention what the Gwede Mandashe gave as an advice, that if you see the members in your meeting starting to decline, you must know that the meeting is over. But thank you very much.
Thanks really for letting us about that, the Gwede Mandashe's theory. So I'll read that very closely. But thank you very much, Prof, for coming here and then reflecting on the kind of work that you are doing, and then also conscientizing us on the kind of discourses that are taking place, but the kind of work that you are doing about those geographies and conceptualization of that, and the being ethical and being unethical and ethical judgments, and the psychological burden that goes with that, social, political burdens that also carries or are part of that kind of a research. Thank you very much. I know you are a member of this team, so you'll always be with us throughout. Maybe I should take this opportunity also just to announce to say next week we'll have a colleague from University of Washington, Kevin Washington, will come and then share some discourses around Ubuntu and how he learned this principle and the value of Ubuntu from the South African soil. And then because he's been writing around the issues of Ubuntu. And maybe let me take this to thank each and every one of you. Dr. Lauret, do you want to say something?
No, I'm good. I think we can, you have expressed our appreciation to Dr. Hlalele and our appreciation to the persons who were here with us today. We look forward to seeing them next week and others. We have transitioned to Zoom, so tell your friends, tell the persons in your network that it is in Zoom, not Microsoft Teams anymore. But yeah, I think we had a fantastic session, so we can close up now.
Okay, thank you very much. And thanks, colleagues, for taking your time and space to come and then spend some time with us. We really appreciate that. This is a learning environment and the learning space. You are all learning every time. Thank you very much and see you next week.
Bye. Be safe.
Thank you. Bye.